Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I am going to give everyone about 2 more minutes to join, and then our director will be on with a short presentation and then open it up to question and answer. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of the screen where you can type your questions in, and you'll also have the ability to raise your hand and ask them verbally as well.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our second lunch with the director. I'm so excited to have each of you here. Each month, we are going to do this on the second Tuesday, and we're going to talk about things that the community is really expressing an interest in wanting to learn about, and things that are really maybe unique to Washington, D.C., or unique to how 911 centers run in an effort to both teach our community about what we do here at the Office of Unified Communications, and also to be more accountable in the things that we do. So thank you for joining. Today, we're going to talk mostly about location routing and what happens to a cell phone call. So I'm going to share my screen, and we can certainly make this deck available. And we also will be making a white page available here soon. So let me just share my screen. Okay, so location-based routing. So before we can talk about how this happens in Washington, D.C., we need to talk about the national perspective of what happens. So an estimated 240 million calls are made to 911 in the U.S. each year. In many areas, including our own D.C., about 80% or more of those calls are from wireless devices. And here in Washington, D.C., that number is at about 80%. Cell phone calls, including 911 calls, are routed through cell phone towers and not through an old wired line system like our landlines are. So sometimes the location where our cell phone call is made and the location of the cell phone tower aren't actually in the same jurisdiction. And because of our close proximity to our neighbors in Prince George's County and Montgomery County, and then in Arlington, the city of Alexandria and Fairfax, what we sometimes experience when you call 911 is that you call 911 from within the city limits of Washington, D.C., but you've gotten a different jurisdiction. So misroutes occur more frequently near the service boundaries. Our service boundaries are our city boundaries, and in areas where multiple jurisdictions are close in proximity. So actually in our national capital region, we do have some of the most complex call routing ways. And in fact, in a document, in a national document called the Interstate Playbook, we actually talk about the directors and the region under the Council of Governments talk about how we are kind of working through these problems, because there are other places that are seeing this too. And actually, even into our far north in the United States, they're seeing countries, right? Some of the calls in Minnesota are routing to Canada and vice versa. So how are we doing this? How are we doing this in Washington, D.C.? So district residents who live in the areas near bordering jurisdictions typically, tell us that they've called 911 and it was answered by Prince George's County or Montgomery County. So for example, if you're on 30th Place and Perry Street in Northeast, you make a call from 911 from your cell phone, you're connected to Prince George's County because the closest cell phone tower to where you are is actually located in Prince George's County. And so we are doing a few things to kind of combat that. And there are some things that you can do, and there are certainly things that we can do. So in combating this issue, there are 4 major players. The first one being the Federal Communications Commission, or the FCC. They are who have authority over the 911 routing. We have the cellular carriers, AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint being the biggest, AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint / T-Mobile are the major 3. Our public safety answering points have a play in this, as do the tech companies, and ultimately you too, as a consumer. There is a small role that you can play in all of this. So I'm going to go through and talk about what everybody's role is, and just kind of hopefully give you a better understanding of kind of where we are and why we can't make fast changes to this. So the FCC is making call routing and location integrity guidelines and standards for the cell carriers to follow, and for states and PSAPs to follow. With that, they are saying that the location of a cell phone device has to be routed to a public safety answering point. Now, prior to December of last year, we had some cell phones who, when a caller called, those calls were being routed to different places based on whether or not the caller had the location of their phone turned on or off. That is no longer the case. Cellular carriers are now required to deliver addressing information to a public safety answering point or a 911 center, regardless of what the consumer wants. You used to have an option, you don't have that option anymore. Cell phone carriers also have to provide both the automated location information, and they also have to provide the information of where the handset actually is that's calling. Public safety answering points have a play here because they have to work together across jurisdictional boundaries to ensure that calls are making it to the right place at the right time. So how do we do that here? We'll explain that a little bit later. Tech companies also now have to provide the GPS. So the same GPS that gets Domino's pizza delivered to your house or lets the Uber or Lyft driver find you now also has to be shared with the 911 center. So in 2018, the FCC, in a notice of inquiry, sought public comments on how frequently misrouted calls occurred for wireless 911 carriers and how it impacts emergency response and how to prevent it. In 2018, the 911 Center here in Washington, D.C., the Office of Unified Communications, participated in the comments, in the public commenting for that. We wanted to let the FCC know exactly what this region was facing. And so we collaborated with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments 911 directors to respond to the notice of inquiry to let them know what was happening here. In 2019, Apple announced that the iOS 13 would offer cellular carriers the option to enable location-based routing, or LBR, to route wireless 911 calls based on location information gathered from the device rather than the location of the cell phone tower. So Apple kind of took the first step in that, and as the iOS platforms are kind of going up, we're seeing more and more accuracy with that. Although I will say we don't see 100% accuracy. And then in 2022, AT&T launched the first ever nationwide location-based routing. Device location is now used to route 911 calls and dispatch first responders to the right location faster. So you have AT&T doing that, and you're seeing the other two, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon kind of following suit there. So What are we doing to fix this? So every quarter, we are working with our neighbors and the cellular carriers to ensure that we're minimizing this from happening. So every quarter, we're going out and we're auditing tower sites to identify where the majority of the calls originate from. So I always use the example of the Prince George's and Washington, D.C. border. We look at that quarterly with the Prince George's County IT team and with the OUC IT team. We look at how many calls came through. Let's say 50,000 calls came in through a cell phone tower on that in that particular quarter. And 26,000 of them were meant for Washington, D.C., and 24,000 of them were meant for Prince George's County. But they can only go to one or the other. We can't delineate 100% which go where. The carriers, like I said, are working on that. AT&T has done that. They've started to do that with the new phones that are out there. But until that is updated, we still have this contingency plan. So the majority of the calls were coming to Washington, D.C., but the tower was directed to go to Prince George's 911 center. We would then work with Prince George's County, the cell carriers, and the cell phone tower company to get that turned to Washington, D.C. So wherever the majority of the calls are coming from is where the PSAP is where they ultimately will fall within the PSAP. So we can change things. We've done that effectively with Montgomery County. We've done that effectively with Prince George's County. And we've also done that effectively in a couple of spots that we border with our neighbors in Virginia. So what can you do? If you have a call that is routed to a neighboring jurisdiction prior to coming to DC, you can do a couple of things. One, the most important, is to stay on the line. Don't hang up. It's not a game of chance where maybe if I call again, I'll get the right jurisdiction. Please don't ever do that. Stay on the line, talk to the 911 call taker at the jurisdiction that you got. Let them know that you're in Washington, D.C. and you need to be transferred. With one click of a button, one press of a button, the call taker can route you and your dynamic location information to our 911 center. We can do rebids. We can hopefully, as long as you have updated technology, see exactly where you are. You should never hang up and try a 10-digit number or a 311 number. When you do that, you are putting yourself in a much lower queue. Our priority here is answering 911 calls. 911 calls also come to us through 911 with the location information that I was just talking about. So if for some reason you're having a medical emergency and maybe you don't know where you're at, or you're disoriented or not familiar with the area, the chances of us being able to find you sooner are much higher if you call 911 and have to get transferred in than if you were to hang up and dial a 10-digit number. With a 10-digit number, we get no location information. With a 10-digit number, we get the same caller ID information that you would get if somebody were to call your home or your landline or your cell phone. So what you can do is after the dust has settled and things have calmed down, you can let us know, and you can do that via our website, or you can email me directly at ouc.director@dc.gov. And we do a couple of things with that information. We look at it, we trace the call back, we look to see what cell phone tower, we can look to see what time it first hit the cell phone tower. If you're saying you called and you were never transferred to us, or you called and you never got anybody, we can always check with our neighbors. We have historically done that. We have a wonderful working relationship with all of our neighbors and all of our 911 centers in this region, and we can simply trace a call back to its origin. If you have a situation where the call doesn't go through, we need to know that too. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had somebody put out on social media that they couldn't get through to DC 911. And so we were able to get the numbers, we were able to trace those back. We were also able to engage with the caller's cell phone provider, and we're working through investigating and trying to see what happened there. We take the fact that location accuracy isn't 100% very, very seriously here. We already live in a city that has some geographical challenges with street names and quadrants. And so we want to do our best to make sure that we're getting the right information the first time we're making contact with you. And so one of the ways that we can do that is to make sure that we are doing our part to review, analyze, and course correct with the cellular phone services, because we do know that the majority of our calls do come from cell phones here in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to take a breather here for a second, and I'm going to answer some of the questions that I see in the QA, and please feel free to type in your questions there, whether it's about this or if it's other things that we can talk about. So the first question is, why can't the 911 center see exactly where I am when I call? Uber and other companies have had location determining technologies for years. So Uber and other companies that have this location determining technology for years are for-profit companies, and they're really pushing their industry to make those changes to provide a better customer service experience. At 911, we want to do that too, but at the end of the day, we are government entities and we don't have the resources that private companies such as Uber have. So what we have done and what we have done successfully is we've kind of made a plea to these companies. If you've ever been in Uber or Lyft, you now know that there's like a one button press that you can push so that you can reach a 911 center. It can open up, it can show your location in an over-the-top application that we use. We can see where you are, we can see direction of travel, we have contact information, even vehicle information is possible to access. But it really comes down to those companies had a very poignant reason to kind of push the industry to do that. And while we did too, we didn't maybe have the resources, but now as we're working together with those private industries to improve the 911 experience overall, we are seeing where those things are coming to fruition. Using applications, over-the-top applications such as Smart 911, and also as our PSAPs in our 911 centers move toward next generation capabilities. Here in Washington, D.C., we were definitely early adopters into the next generation 911 platform. And so we were able to kind of accept text before other places in our region and in the state. And we're now working to accept video and still images. We're not quite there yet, but it is something that I hope will come to fruition in the next 12 months. My elderly dad lives in North Michigan Park, a couple of blocks away from Prince George's County, and he always gets Prince George's County when he calls 911. I'm worried about whether he will get help fast enough in emergency situations. All 911 call takers in our region, whether it be in Maryland, DC, or Virginia, are trained to deal with emergency situations. We will always stay on the line and announce ourselves. This is Washington, D.C. with a transfer. This is Prince George's County with a transfer. And then I would also say, when things happen like this, if you could let us know by letting us know on our feedback form on our website or by emailing me, we can look into it a little bit more. It's also important that on the phones, you go in and make sure that their settings are allowing for location-based information to be shared, especially if it's an older cell phone. Newer cell phones have that enabled, and the hope is that we get that. What we get is usually within a 50-yard radius. It might not be pinpointed, but at least that'll help us get them in the general vicinity, if a person doesn't know the exact address. I live in Upper Northwest, and we get the Montgomery County 911 Center when we call 911. Why can't police or ambulances from Maryland be sent to help us? Wouldn't that be faster, easier, and better for everyone? So ideally, that would be. There are mutual aid agreements with our responders. In some instances, of course, you have to also remember that if you're in Washington, D.C., Montgomery County cannot dispatch to Washington, D.C. They don't know what's available. So it has to come to the PSAP or the jurisdictional PSAP, which is here at OUC. And then we work with our officials or liaison officers from DC Fire and EMS and MPD to get allocated resources or mutual aid resources if those things are needed. But so I understand how, in theory, that seems like a great idea. However, they don't have a look into the resource availability that we have, and they don't have the ability to dispatch them. So, to us without letting us know. So hopefully that answers that one. I don't understand why sometimes when I call 911, I get DC 911, but sometimes I get Prince George's County. So that just is based on the load of a cell phone tower at any given point. A cell phone tower is a triangle. Each side of that triangle can handle a certain number of calls. So especially if you're calling for an incident where a lot of people might be calling, and I think the most common would be the sounds of gunshots. Oftentimes we see a spike of those of 911 calls when incidents like that happen. And so if one side of the cell phone tower has reached its capacity, the cell call will go to another side of the cell phone tower. One side of a cell phone tower might be pointed towards Prince George's County because the majority of the calls that hit that side are meant for Prince George's County. The other side might be directed towards Washington, D.C., because the majority of the calls that hit that side were meant for Washington, D.C. The important thing, again, and I can't say this enough, is to make sure that you stay on the line, let them know what happened. Even sometimes on those borders on Southern Avenue, Eastern Avenue, things like that, or places like that, we're both taking a lot of calls for the same thing, and we both may be sending a response there because in those locations we don't always know what side of the road it is on or whatever. And so what they might say to you is, we already have officers en route, or we have officers en route, DC has officers en route, and we will they'll share that information with us later if there's like an investigation. Like if it's in Washington, D.C. and MPD has to do an investigation, we can get that information from Prince George's County and share that with investigating officers. So that's what we're doing to remedy this. We're looking at the situation on a quarterly basis. We are working with our partners to make sure that the majority of the calls that are hitting the cell phone towers are right. We are always encouraging residents to use the Smart 911 application. You can find that on both the Google Android and the Apple platforms. Both are free. It's a green icon with a lock. It says Smart 911. You go in and you can create a profile with addressing and things like that. And for the attendee who asked about their father, if you wanted, every time he calls 911, you could set it up in his profile for you to get an alert so that you would know. It also provides contact information. So if responders get out there and they want to make contact with a family member, we have that information that we can share with them to call you. I think I've answered everything in the chat. We've put a couple of things in the chat. We've put the Smart 911 in the chat. We've put our feedback form in the chat. And we've also, I will put a white paper that I wrote about this in the chat. I see several of you are from community organizations, maybe your ANCs. Thank you so much for being here. But Anna has just added a 911 misrouted call document. Please feel free to share that out with your friends and neighbors. If you're in another PSAP, please feel free to use that document. You'll have to change a couple of things so that it's matches with your jurisdiction, but you're free to use that information. It cites some of the things that we talked about today. And also, as always, as I come into this role as the acting director, I want to get to connect with as many of you in our great city that I can. So if you are an ANC, if you are somebody who's leading a civic organization, or you just have a group of neighbors that have some questions, please use our feedback form, request some time with me, and I'd be happy to come out. I'm happy to join virtually or in person, and get to know you and get to know your concerns so that hopefully we can address those. So in the last few minutes, I just want to share all the ways that you can connect with us on social media. You can tweet us at OUC _DC, 311 at DC. Gov at 311, you can actually put in 311 service request, which is new and a really emerging form of technology and a way to connect with us. You can only do this for 311. 911 needs to be a voice phone call or text. You just simply text 911 and it'll come to us. We have a presence on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. So if you have not already, please make sure that you're following us on these things and interact with us. On March 1st, I launched a feedback form. If you have a good experience, let us know. If you have a less than stellar experience, let us know. We're trying to hold, we are holding all of our employees and our team members accountable for the things that they do and the experiences that you have. And we only want to improve each day when we answer the call. So please use that feedback form. It is anonymous. Of course, we don't ever give your information, but I do want to connect with you and I do want to hear what you have to say about DC's Office of Unified Communications. And lastly, on Thursday, May 11th, we are going to be talking about recruiting, and we're also going to be talking about a new initiative, which is the OUC Citizen Academy. For those of you that may know, we have the OUC Junior Academy, which was geared towards high school students between the ages of 14 and 18. And those kiddos who joined us are going to actually be graduating from that first academy tonight. We're so proud of them and the dedication and work that they've put in to learning about OUC. And now we want to open it up to the residents of Washington, D.C. So this will be the first cohort. We hope to have many more after. We're probably going to limit it to about 15 or 20 residents. We'd like to have representatives from all 8 wards participate. And so we'll kind of be talking about what that's going to look like and how to register for that. And that'll be on Thursday, May 11th at 12 o'clock. So hopefully you will have an opportunity to join us. As always, we are recording these sessions and we'll make them available on our website afterwards. And if you have any questions or you have any thoughts or ideas for future sessions or things that you want to know about, please just email me, ouc.director@dc.gov. And I can't thank you enough for joining us. It looks absolutely gorgeous outside, so hopefully you can get out there and enjoy some of the day. And I just want to note that this week is actually National Telecommunicators Week nationwide, celebrating the 200,000 or so 911 call takers and dispatchers who are working at 6,000 PSAPs across the nation. And we're so fortunate to have some of the very best ones here in Washington, D.C. If you are interested in joining our team, we are currently hiring for 30 telephone equipment operators or 911 call takers. That job is open through DCHR. You can visit their website at dchr.gov, or you can check out our social media to find the link. And it'll explain the job that we do here and what we're looking for. You don't need any previous experience. We're excited that we have an in-house training academy, and we're always looking for great talent and great Washingtonians to join our team. So thank you so much for joining, and we hope you have a great day.